items. Okay.
And just, we know what number 1 is, we've talked about number 2. Number 3 and number 4, kind of as Brent said, there has been a number of bills written by the Builders Association trying to put the cost of development onto cities. And this is essentially like, not only like let cities make decisions for cities, because humbly, we think we're the best folks to make the decisions for our community, not somebody who's sitting in St. Paul. And the other one is infrastructure fees about that development component. So I like these. I think these are headed in the right direction. I also think like we saw success last year. Number 6 dropped off with the regulation of cannabis products. So I do like skinnying this up a little bit, but I think this is the right list for us for 2024.
I have one question on the drafts for 2024, but first a comment. I like having the comparison of the two.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And then there's the link for the cities. It was, so on the 2024 drafts, number 3, what is valuation freezes? Local restrictions include the imposition of artificial mechanisms such as?
So there are, as the mayor mentioned, there have been any number of, let's say, proposed legislation that, like for instance, valuation freezes is they would stop property values from increasing throughout the city or the county. In some instances, they've put on, there's been
So they being like somebody else can't?
The state
This,
would prohibit it. In some cases, there's been proposed legislation that would make the annual budget a referendum. So if enough, or a reverse referendum, so if 10% of the population petitioned, there'd be a referendum on the budget. There's been any number of proposed requirements that, in essence, dilute the local authority of the city council. And so what this is saying is, the city opposes anything that would limit the ability of the city council to take action for what you think is best for the community.
And it's really just the state. It's not like an association or a union, or it's not.
Correct. It's a representative from parts unknown in the state that believes in an issue, and if we believe, and the league has been a champion on this, if it is going to take away local control from the city council, you're saying you fundamentally oppose that out of hand.
Okay. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Any other questions, comments, objections? All right, I think we're good. Okay. All right, city manager's report. Mr. Murray.
All right, so in the council's packet, there's the report that was prepared by the Water Resource team, and Dan Lannis is going to go over it. I just want to kind of lay a little bit of groundwork before Dan and Chad chime in on this. As you know, and I think there's been a lot of chatter in the community, starting a week ago Saturday, the city received upwards of 40 reported concern comments related to discolored water. I would say it was one of the most challenging exercises because the reports were vast, meaning on a typical issue, if any one of you would call and say my street hasn't been plowed, we can see it, we can act on it. If there's a pothole, if there's a swing that's broken, if someone's being too noisy. In this instance of these 40 concerns, the timeline was anywhere from like right now to 6 months ago. And frankly, only about a handful of folks were experiencing brown water at the time, or discolored water, or rust-colored water. And so I applaud our team, because to try to diagnose symptoms that occurred, 6 months ago, and which could be any number of things. It's like calling the doctor right now and saying I had a fever and a cough and I felt terrible in July. Do you know what it is? What could be going on? And so every situation is different, and for our team to compile, that 40 sets of information that individually could be any number of things. I just want to, I know it's a significant issue, but we pretty much had everybody drop everything for an entire week and commit resources to this. And it's not because something was done wrong, but because the information was needed and we wanted to respond very quickly. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan to give a summary of the report, for Chad to add some perspective, and for the council to provide any feedback that you'd like to, or questions that you might have.
Before we get into that, did you say of the 40 concerns, how many were, oh my gosh, my water's brown, right?
I'd say 3 or 4 of the 40
Me and Mary, and there was
initially.
one other one that was actually the day of.
Well, I would segregate you and Mary, because we knew that came from starting up to 6th Street.
Right, after what we
PRV.
presented, yes.
I'm chunking the balance of the 40 outside of that. The majority of the folks were, I just want to, because we would ask, are you experiencing discoloration now, or do you just want to know about the topic? And outside of that handful, excluding you and Mary for that direct reason, it was, I just want to know more about the issue.
Right, okay.
So when that one email that had the dates, and there was like quite a few on the 9th and the 10th, that's the dates reported, not. Is there somewhere that shows when they had the issue? Or?
That's the fundamental concern is, we couldn't get that data.
Okay.
There were maybe 5 folks that said they were experiencing something now, and our team triaged it. But we weren't getting dates, we weren't getting circumstances related to the conditions, and so, there are, as Dan will explain, there are maintenance and Chad maintenance items that we do that can stir things up, but not knowing the circumstances of when they did it and how that aligns up with our maintenance schedule or what other construction activities might be going on at the time. We still want to respond, and we did, and we'll continue to do so, but the emphasis here is that real-time feedback is critical in diagnosing these pieces, because there's a narrative that the city is just sharing that it's the residents' fault, and if we hear about something 3 months from now, we're not triaging what we've done because we did the hydrant flushing maybe 3 weeks ago. We're trying to get that discolored water out of your system. And so it is complex, is essentially the headline here. And that's why I'm thankful for everyone's efforts in that. So Dan, if you want to kind of just give some high points from that report that we created for the community.
Sure. First off, has everybody read through it? It's all
Yes.
to take in, so that would be very difficult to kind of walk line by line. So if you've got a background on what we were actually experiencing, it was, as Brent noted, a challenge because it was somewhat of a snowball. And the number one thing that you should start with when you get these complaints is often there's going to be a public services complaint. There's often related to some hydrant flushing that happened in the past, and some sediment from the flushing might get into homes. It happens after flushing each year. It's very common in cities. So we're starting with, do we have something going on here? Because they did flush a couple weeks ago, and we had to start to take a look at all the complaints. And the number one most challenging thing is, I think there started to be a bit of a word of mouth being spread. So some of these complaints were not current, which is not as common. We don't see people posting a lot about stuff that they had dealt with, years ago or last couple of years. It just sort of collected into a snowball of comments, where some of them actually did have some active issues. But what we had to do is we started to compile all these into locations, and we had to, number one, diagnose, is there anything going on at the water treatment plant? Sometimes things can get in people's heads. Do they have something going on that they read in the news somewhere else? Of course, that's an easy thing, or a difficult thing for us to respond to, and easy for people to jump to the worst case scenario. Do we have a Flint thing going on? And so it started with, all right, how are we looking at the water treatment facility? And so that all starts with their testing standard, what's leaving the water treatment facility, where are these complaints occurring? I mean, it was very clear very quickly that the water treatment facility was doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's hitting all the treatment standards of the Department of Health. It was producing water that was clear. You wouldn't see any indication of discoloration from anything that we were seeing at the water treatment facility. So then it got into, well, what are we experiencing and where? And so it came down to is either water treatment facility or it's distribution system related. It's one or the other. And then if it's in the distribution system, it's usually related to events, something that would have occurred. Hydrants being opened, large flows. A lot of times, if hydrants cracked, flows can break stuff loose, and it can end up in a house or two, things of that nature. But the number one thing that we got to was it's not citywide. There's treated water leaving the plant. It's clear. It's what it's supposed to be. Department of Health standards are being met consistently. Can there be any optimization of filtration, things like that? Sure, but it's not related to any of these issues. So that's the first thing that we had to at least clear up is it's not plant related, and then it's all right. So a distribution system, what is happening? So there's certain folks that have said this has gone back years. We've talked to a couple of folks that had comments that said this was not isolated, but it wasn't active. It wasn't very recent, but they've had neighbors who've had comments. Anyway, we started to collect the comments, and it did center around some patterns. And we started to see a couple of areas that had more frequent complaints, whether they were current or they were just making a complaint because their neighbors had said something and said now's a good time. I can't really speak to that here. It was the fact that they did tend to center around a certain area to the point where it could make some sense. That we had some long dead ends, where if you have stagnant water sitting in a portion of the pipe for a longer period of time because winter demand is much lower than summer, you don't turn the water over in the pipes as quickly, and sometimes that water can get a little bit stale. So is it possible that they could have been seeing this over the years and just not putting comments in, or not being flagged and tracked in the same way it is now? Possible. And so what we're looking at is, all right, well, if we're related to a couple of these areas, if it's all related to the distribution system, it generally is a flushing issue, or it's generally got to do with something that's happening in the distribution system, which is a valve that's closed. Brent explained nicely that you close a valve, you've effectively closed off looping. What looping is intended to do is keep water circulating, keeping it fresh. That's why all pipes are looped. So it's moving in both directions. The water's constantly circulating through the system. You'll notice that's how distribution systems are always set. I always loop them back and try not to have a long dead end anywhere. Because once it's a long dead end, if you don't draw enough from the end of it, it just sits there. And that's what we have in a couple portions of our system that is very sensitive to flushing frequency and sensitivity. And so we think there's a number of these that would have some validity to time of year. We don't expect that these would have been issues in the summertime, and I haven't been able, when I've asked that question, it wasn't always clear if these were year-round concerns or just a certain time of year. We're starting to get folks to really key in on what they need to tell us in order for us to help them. And date, cold, hot, all those things. And so I think we're getting a little bit more thorough, and when these complaints come in, you do have to have some details on what you're experiencing. Then we can jump on it. But in the final recommendations here, it's coming down to the fact that I do think we might want to change up our flushing system, our flushing processes a little bit. We did have some conversations with folks that have dealt with Coney, Prior Lake, and some other public services recommendations and such related to long dead ends and what they had to do. And a lot of it comes down to some winter flushing, which is not an easy thing to be dealing with. You're talking about sometimes every couple of weeks in the wintertime waiting for weather. It's not an easy process to do. And you don't want to do it if it's not necessary. And so, but there are a couple areas that we recommended go into almost a bi-weekly or all through the winter flushing, bleed those lines clear, keep the clear water running through. Communications on hydrant flushing is another thing. I think we could probably step up really what to expect on it. When you flush hydrants, expectation that nothing is going to end up in anybody's home is not a reasonable expectation to set. Any city out there, you're going to be dealing with it. And we have folks that work on our facilities that have to bleed their lines when they have flushing in the city of Burnsville or whatever. So we don't want to set the wrong expectation that we're going to be perfect, because it doesn't exist really. And so, but we do think it's important for them to understand, set expectations when they flush. This is what to expect in these certain areas. And then folks that we've been, some of them have just, I believe, been needing information. And a lot of information has been put out. And so I think that was step number one, is get the information out there. Step number two is we do have a program that's going to be changing out what to expect from the flushing side of things. And we're also doing a little bit of optimization in the treatment facility. If we can lower our manganese levels a little bit, there's right in spec, but we'd like to get them down a little bit more. It's a slight process adjustment that will help even further with what could ever even end up in the distribution system that could break loose during flushing. So the short of it is it was a long week. And I think the number one issue is information. I really believe that there's a strong expectation to see something done, but it tends to be a more isolated group in some isolated areas, or if we had a water treatment facility issue, you'd have 5,000 complaints coming in. And so that is not the case, because most of the system is as it should be, but those areas where we were seeing some comments, there might be some pent-up frustration, and right now action is the one thing, and that's flushing. Information is the other thing, which is kind of settling the concerns down that there's some issue out there with water quality, which is pretty easy to say there is not. So questions or thoughts?
So if you have these long end lines, what are other cities doing? Just flushing? I mean, we're not the only city has growth who ends up with these long dead ends. Or are we ending up with more long dead ends than we should be having? I mean, is it just because it's not reached the next development, or is it some way that we're setting up our roads and our developments?
You're a growing city, and so when you're a growing city, you end up with these more often because you constantly have the next development being set up. It means it's valved to connect and extend, valved to connect and extend. You're always doing that. Where we can, we're going to loop it together until the connection occurs. But when you're growing a tremendous amount, you're going to have these areas. We were talking to a former public service director for Prior Lake. They had a 16-inch main that was all serving a whole other part of the city. They had to bleed that line for weeks to keep any services on there fresh. So it happens. You try and avoid it, but it is part of growth. And you do your best you can to minimize it, but there are those areas where literally you just have to do more flushing. And so, no, I wouldn't say it's always preventable, but I would say it's a product of a fast-growing city.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so with my issues that day, which is very odd, by the way, that all of these came in on the same day, because when you sent that list, I was like, what happened? Because I had brought water that day, and so did most of our neighborhood down here, but we had the PRV issue that we found out later.
Yep.
Things like that, I mean, can we look into our crystal ball and say, okay, if when we do this repair, we can probably expect that there's going to be groundwater and get some communication out ahead of time?
Yes, we try to do kind of a low flow flush after we put that back into service, but obviously it didn't work. And we're also changing flows with that PRV down. Water is going a different way than when that PRV is open and online.
Mm-hmm.
So we just don't know how that flow is going to.
One of the things that we have as an action item, and we might end up coming back to the council, in years to come for additional resources. But our plan is to do door hangers during hydrant flushing, which is, I think, needed, but it's also tedious, to get people out there. But I think we've seen it in other situations, whether it be like, have you seen a deputy drive by or whatever? We need a receipt let people know that we've been out there, because having them or us rely on them looking at the website or Facebook is not enough. Brenda Good and I have met with our website manager. There's some new communication tools that we think we can leverage to, city notices, to text, email, that we can get people ramped up to. But as Dan said, I think information, letting people know what to expect rather than just turning on the faucet and seeing the discoloration is almost as critical as anything else we're talking about here.
And I think the texting would be great. I mean, you get it when your power goes out, right? Like, we're expecting it back in 2 hours, whatever it is. Do we put the sandwich boards out on this road when we do hydrant flushing?
Yeah, that's the second part we want to do. So we have sandwich boards for the election. So Christine and Brenda are working on some drafts of like updating the language of saying hydrant flushing with maybe a QR code of tips on post flushing, and to put those up at like key points in neighborhoods when you're flushing.
Okay. So when we're talking about door hangers again, with the tedious part of it, most cities I see have the sandwich boards out, right? So it's happening. And I want to be as transparent with the public, but at the same time, I want to look at what our city resources are. Is that their best spent way is to walk around putting door hangers on? I don't know that, personally, I think that is the best way. I think we're going to have somebody, how many houses would that affect at one time? 100?
Yeah, well, it depends on where you do it, but I don't think it's the best way, to be frank, but I do think initially, I think we need to push back a little bit on getting people the information so that it's an established kind of norm of hydrant flushing, this is what it is. And I just think that space is so uncharted right now, and there's information coming from different perspectives that if we don't set the base of what this is and what's occurring, we leave it to others to describe it for us. And that's, is it long term? No, but I think for, if we flushed a hydrant right now, I think we gotta put door hangers on to say we're flushing hydrants, otherwise we're gonna get 3 dozen phone calls.
What makes me nervous though is that the expectation is forever there's going to be a door hanger. So if this is the route that you want to start with, again, I don't know if it's my preferred route. I'd rather do the sandwich boards. You'll see, you notice them as you drive down the road. And again, considering staff time to walk out and hang all those. How are we setting this out so that we, in the future, then don't have an expectation that every time we flush hydrants forever, that there's going to be city staff walking around, taking their time to put out thousands of door hangers?
I see where you're saying. I think we absolutely sunset it at some point, but I think maybe that's the message that's on the door hanger. We're gonna start using other methods.
Watch for the sandwich boards.
Or we've got this cool text ability that 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 years from now we can do, sign up here to get text alerts.
That I can get on board with,
whatever.
yes. Otherwise,
but I do think we have gotta send out an ice cream truck, send out a fire truck with the alarm, because we live in this crazy world that even if we say we're doing something, people are like, well, I didn't see it happen, it didn't happen, so I think we need to go big initially.
I'm fine starting with that way, with here's what it's going to look like after this.
Yeah,
So
that's good feedback.
Especially if we're gonna be increasing the frequency, right? Right, that's reading the technical, right? So the idea of the flushing is you flush out the contaminants that have built up if the water is stagnant.
So to be clear, it's not contaminants.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because we're
You're right, you're right. The sediment, yes, sediment. But during that, it stirs it up, right? Because the idea is to get out. So if you happen to have your water running or something, you could inadvertently draw that into your house. Right? There's the steps we need the public to take while the flushing is occurring to help them minimize the discoloration in the future, right?
Yeah, so a piece, and this is where if you could jump back in on this, Chad, that I think is being misrepresented, frankly, is, we do the city does the flushing to get the pieces out. But when it's in the household system, there's nothing that we can do from the distribution system to get the iron deposits and sediment outside of the person's household plumbing. So we're gonna be more dedicated on telling them like what caused it. But the narrative is that somehow when we triage it, it's just the homeowner doesn't know how to maintain their water softener or their sediment in their reservoir for their toilet. Can you just, or the tubs, Chad, can you
Eric,
just?
what did you have?
So that, you're probably gonna get to this, but there's a real example of this that's been kind of cycling on social media, and it's, my concern is managing those expectations. Because we're gonna do these things, we're gonna try to make some improvements, we're gonna improve communication, this is great. Somebody has posted a picture of their reverse osmosis system pre-filter, which is full of brown gunk.
Right.
As it should be, because that's its job.
Right.
And that individual was upset that in 6 months, this is what my filter looked like.
Right.
The replacement schedule is 3 months. So we'll do these things and we're gonna have a vocal minority, perhaps, that still has an expectation of ultra-refined water in their home from the city, that may not understand that the resin tank in their water softener has a finite lifespan, or that an iron, the pellets that are designed to reduce iron are specifically for that purpose. Or if you want this, there's a home system that does it, but only one community in Minnesota has reverse osmosis processing at a community level.
Right.
So how do we manage those expectations and that education? What stops at your door,
Right.
and what's your responsibility inside the house?
Well, currently, we're educating residents that if they do experience the discolored water, to run either an outside spigot or a laundry sink. Water softeners are not selective, so whatever goes in them can be cleaned out. The residents that we visited last week, all their softeners were set incorrectly. They were a little bit low, so we bumped them up, monitored, we follow up a week later, and everything has been fine. So I think it's just when you experience that, shut off the water, flush it from a outside spigot, compare the water, because if your outside water is clean, maybe you did just get a small, burp of iron manganese water into the house. But the softener will catch it. It's a lot of just education and kind of talking through. And, if you consume water while we're flushing, especially hot water, you're gonna fill up a 60 to 100 gallon tank, and you're gonna experience that for several times, several days while you use hot water, so.
Can you talk a little, because a number of the concerns are clumped around using water in a bathtub,
Yes.
which isn't by accident. Can you just
I
share some
actually have a good real life example of that. So, and I just have some questions too. So what I've heard from neighbors, one couldn't believe when they fill the bathtub, that's what they see. And then the other neighbor had no idea what was going on. Well, they're totally different stages in life, and one has 4 young kids and they use the bath a couple times a day.
Right.
Versus if you're, just, the option is a better option is a shower, when it's, flowing, you don't see it. So it's really, I think that's part of the education too, that
But I think
yes.
Chad can explain the tub thing, right?
Yeah, well, when you look through a column of water, it's going to be amplified, that color. If you're in a shower and it's on you and then just goes down the drain, you're not gonna see it. A lot of the reports have been toilets. And we've actually, a couple of the homes that we visited had some discolored water in their tank. So every time you flush, you're gonna get a small dose of that discolored water in with the clean water. And it looks in that column of water in your toilet, it's gonna be amplified.
It has that white background,
It's
just like if
usually
you,
white.
a lot of water tests, they'll use white styrofoam cups.
Correct.
So then you can actually see the bottom.
Can you, there is an example we shared where someone was just using a mix of hot or cold water and somehow that.
In one home that we had, this resident experienced discolored water only in their jacuzzi tub. So typically when they want to use the jacuzzi tub, they turn the hot water on completely and the cold water on completely. And we calculated the GPMs were, I'll just use round numbers for simplicity, but pulling 20 gallons of water through their water softener but their softener is only rated for 12 gallons per minute. So it was actually, whatever the media was catching was getting stripped off due to the high flows. So,
And that's the kind of education that, we don't go into here.
right.
It's important, so we're managing expectations. That's my concern is, how do we, we don't want to step into every homeowner's basement and tell them what to do with their water softener or how it works.
Mhm.
But I think we do have a lot of angst because there's a misunderstanding or lack of understanding of how those in-home systems work and the maintenance they require.
Mhm.
So,
We do have, I guess I don't want to forget to mention this, we do have a plan on FAQ, frequently asked questions, which is going to be, to me, a very big deal. Because we'd like to point people to that's going to say, if you're seeing this, please check these things before.
Yeah.
Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it the base? Is it pre or post water softener? Is what we're trying to figure out. Is it a year round? Is it a winter condition? Those things, if they can get down that list, then we can get to the point where we're responding to an actual legitimate issue at that location.
Yeah.
Versus things that, quite frankly, are just almost maybe information, a lack of information, or in some cases it's just fear because of what they heard down the street from 6 months ago or something. It's not defined. So
Yeah.
So procedurally with that, will that be like, hey Brent, hey Chad, my water is brown. Okay, cool, Courtney, thanks for calling and letting us know. We just got a few things that we need to,
Help
here's the
diagnose.
FAQs.
Mhm.
Can you take a look? It'll help us diagnose. And additionally, we need you to answer these questions. What time? Hot, cold, day, like all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Okay,
Perfect.
so when will the FAQs be ready?
we are working on that. And Brett's got a nice FAQ for the actual issues at hand. But this one's going to take a while. It's probably.
I don't expect another one.
The answer is probably, for me, I think it's January where we start having a draft. This is something that to me lives on the city webpage for a long time, but I'm gonna turn it over to Brent to say really.
Yeah, I
what
think
was
of
done.
it as a library, we're gonna keep
Okay.
adding books.
Okay.
And so it's not gonna come as one
No, I
package, we're gonna do, a book on toilets, a book on water, that sounds gross. A book on-
That sounds really George.
But it's a piece at a time.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that, Brenda Good is doing is researching, websites of other cities that have really great water resources for residents. Just in doing some research, I saw that the city of Burnsville did a video, related to some of these issues, so I'm gonna contact their city manager and ask if we can use their video. Cities are usually pretty good about sharing information. But it won't come as like okay, the FAQs are ready.
Yeah, okay, perfect. I consider myself a novice homeowner. This is the first home we've ever had, and there's been a lot of talk about water in our house over the last week, as I imagine in all of our homes, right? And Zach goes, well, the water in my toilet's brown, and we had the same scenario where there was some sediment in the tank, so of course, every time you flush it, that comes through. So you siphon that out, you clean that out, we're back in business, good as new. But you've got to look, and I wouldn't have thought to have looked, but for it not been all of this water talk in the city that we've had the last week. So I hope it goes without saying, I know that I've said to a lot of you guys individually, thank you for all your work on this. It's a hard week last week. Today continues to be hard. Tomorrow might not be any better, but I am so impressed at how quickly you turned us around. This, unfortunately, especially the lack of a loop system, isn't something that is gonna be like, well, we flushed it once, we're good until the spring. Like, this is gonna be a long haul. But I feel like we are in a better place than we've ever been. I think we will have to do our own communication with residents, and that's really hard with this machine of social media and rumor. But I think you guys are all doing a really great job, and I'm really proud of what we were able to accomplish last week.
Yeah, just on that, is being an engineer in my day job, having bug reports from other colleagues trying to diagnose, oh, okay, what version are you running? What thing, going through your checklist of, I know how to fix the problem if you can tell me enough answers that I can figure out what your problem is. So no, I feel for all the, like, why is it over here and not here? Why is it, no. Yeah, no, great work.
Thank you. A couple other,
I have some
oh, sorry,
questions.
yeah.
Could we add to the website when they report a concern, when they last maybe saw the concern, or when did you notice the concern?
We did add that this week, or last week.
Okay, I don't think I saw it.
Friday afternoon,
Okay.
maybe, Friday morning.
I thought I just looked, but that's great, because I think that'll, not just this, but anything
Future.
of a concern. And then the other thing is, that was helpful, the map, and now I know more about these dead ends. Is that, like, we know with confidence of like, okay, if we flush these hydrants, these residents by this address are likely to be affected? Like, is it a,
Yeah, there's a
Like-
little bit of a science to it.
okay,
I mean, and that's the other thing is in the summer, the rest of the recommendations come down to some potentially a directional flushing program, which is a little bit more targeted,
okay,
where you actually isolate this area and try and blow it all out. It's a more complicated flushing, but that's seasonal. That's not what we're doing now.
Okay.
So you have to click,
thank you,
you
David.
have to click
Yes.
yes. And then
Do we want that to be on there just all the time though, in case for anything else, that we know whether it happened 2 days ago,
I would like
whether
it
I
for
saw
all
the swing was
issues.
broken last weekend, or
I
then,
just didn't report
You
it.
can do that probably, right?
So what I want to avoid is somebody saying, oh, I didn't know you were flushing the hydrants, when there was, 5 ways of it communicated. But it sounds like we,
I don't know we'll ever be able to accomplish that.
but we're like, that was the cutoff of like, or how do you give direction on if you do the flyers, who to give them to, if not to? But it sounds like you, and there was that map I saw too, it sounds like you have that figured out.
I'd probably overdo it just a hair. I mean,
Okay.
these people are going to be, and these people might be,
Okay,
and that's reasonable to estimate.
okay.
We
And then I
might not
have,
be perfect, but.
I have one more question. When the water comes into the treatment plant, so when it's groundwater,
Mhm.
do we know what the level, and just knowing that manganese is a natural, it's a mineral, it's natural, but like some soils or groundwater, soil water will have different levels. Is that just something unique to us? Like maybe we already start out with something a little higher? So we have to take more work, or?
Yeah, every aquifer is gonna have different levels. I mean, you've got, I think our manganese coming out of the well, I believe Herman had indicated it was like 0.5, 0.6, something like that. So it's a fairly,
Is that what
so-
other
but
cities
that's
have we-
being knocked down to 0.1 or
Mhm.
below.
So 10x.
Yeah, so it's, and then iron, I don't know the numbers on iron, but yeah, for sure. When you take it out of the ground, it's just gonna be high iron
But
and
like, do we
manganese,
know,
which
does
is
it more work for our city? Like I know we have some challenges with elevation. Like is it more?
Yeah, you've got higher iron and manganese, but you also don't have arsenic. So there's different things. Each cities have different issues. I know some
Okay.
some locations are dealing with things where we would consider them to be public health issues and have to shut off water supplies
Okay.
if these levels get up higher.
Okay.
So iron and manganese, they tend to be more cosmetic.
Mhm.
And cosmetics still causes fear and anxiety about what that actually is.
Mhm.
But no, you're not dealing with some of those that we consider to be, some toxic
Okay.
issues that some areas would have, but certainly aesthetic issues. If you weren't doing filtration, you can only imagine the number of calls you'd be getting.
Right. Okay.
So those levels are tested. On the raw water, the influent water coming in, they're tested twice a week. So that helps us kind of set how we pace our chemicals to do maximum removal.
Okay. So is there anything you can say like with our aquifers that like this is kind of what we've been given for what's gonna be a challenge, maybe it's not higher magnesium, maybe I don't wanna use that as the example, but like if there's trends or like different areas have different,
Yeah, I mean, it could be
Qualities.
aquifer dependent and, where it's drilled. So each well's gonna be different.
okay,
If we end up with a well field up to the north, the Jordan aquifer might end up yielding some different levels than what we're getting out of
So-
these. It all gets blended together and it ends up being a net, and we're trying to hit it, filtered down to a certain threshold, right?
Okay.
And so, yes, it is aquifer dependent, and yes, you've got some higher iron and manganese
Okay.
levels in some of your wells, but it's also not outside of the realm of
Right.
what we typically would deal
Okay.
with. So,
Thank you.
Are there any other to-dos that the council would like to see occur other than what's been discussed? Just want to make sure we're showing up the way you need us to.
I'm happy.
So a couple other updates at your January 2nd meeting. We're gonna have the annual employee handbook update. This, for the most part, just some administrative changes. The headline, which you might start hearing quite a bit about, is new regulation related to employees' safety and sick leave. That's required of all businesses. We're fortunate in that our PTO covers kind of that piece. So there's not an additional financial cost, at least for the full-time employees. We are gonna have to navigate some changes for our part-time folks, primarily the fire department. But that won't come in this employee handbook. I just wanted to let you know that's on its way. And then.
Is that a 2025 effective date for that?
2024.
2024.
Yeah, just 2024.
But primarily because of how our PTO is, it covers it. It's just we have to have it memorialized throughout our employee handbook and make sure that it's accounted for appropriately in payroll.
Okay.
Financial policies, Lynn, just want to give a little commercial on what you're going to be bringing to the council.
Yep, so I've been working on our fund balance policy as well as our purchasing policy. So our fund balance policy, the main update there, if you can remember, any unassigned fund balance in the general fund, we normally were reclassing to the special capital fund. And as I've been explaining throughout the last few months, we are going to, any unassigned fund balance over 40%, we are going to allow the council to decide what they would like to do with that. Look at options, Brent and I will come up with options, and then you'll determine what you want to do with that, put it into the capital equipment fund, save it for fund balance, pay down debt, we'll have an array of different options for you, but we're going to essentially eliminate the special capital fund. And so that language will be in the fund balance policy. We removed some of the language in the employee handbook and placed it into the purchasing policy. Specifically, we made it relating to like meals and different things like that. As far as the purchasing goes, updated some language about credit cards and some limits on levels that I'm having Dave look at right now. So more to come on that on the first meeting in January.
And speaking of that, so January 1st is on Monday, New Year's, so we'll be meeting on Tuesday. We don't have anything scheduled for the work session, so that'll be canceled, so regular meeting on the 2nd. Then something that kind of, after going through the last truth in taxation that occurred is, like, throughout my time here in Carver, we've never invited the county assessor in just to kind of explain the assessment process, which seems to be a very, I did tell him that you would be interested, so he's aware. But it just seems to be kind of woven into a lot of questions that the council gets during truth in taxation, so wanted to provide a better line of sight so you understand the process. So the first part of the meeting will be the county assessor, and then the second half, Dave Anderson is going to lead a open meeting and gift law training for the council, but we've also invited the planning commission and HPC to join in to something I'm sure you're fairly familiar with, but I just want to make that, give us some good line of sight to all of you that are impacted by that. And we've scheduled that training. So Carver Place Development will be on your January 16th meeting. It's went through the planning commission last Thursday without a lot of fanfare. To my knowledge, there wasn't any public comment at the public hearing related to it. Sorry if I'm stealing your thunder.
I'll do it in the updates at the end.
But kind of in a companion piece to that, found out that the CDA's other building, the Carver Oaks, the senior Workforce or Affordable Housing Project was funded by HFA. So expect to see that project sometime in 2024 as well. And then happy to have Brenda Good and Paul Schultz speak about the skating rink. So for years, I think we've had a challenge of kind of articulating the skating rink process of how it's put together and the challenges that we've had with kind of how it was constructed, and then kind of communicating that out. And so we've been meeting as a parks team for several months, and Paul and Brenda really led a great effort on doing that differently this year. So they're here tonight to talk about it.
So Paul and I are gonna tag team. I must say this has been a fun project for me, learning a lot about the ice rink. It's not as simple as, yes, it's good to go, or we're waiting on weather. So I learned a lot through it, and Eric Madigan was a great resource for this as well. He's got a good passion for this Olympic-sized ice rink that we have, so I learned that about it. So Paul's gonna take it over now, talk about the new product for sealing and repairs, and then I'll come back with communication. So Paul, if you wanna.
So with Becker Arena Products, they're the original designers and makers of like the boards that are on this. For years, we've had the issue of, to make it properly drain in the summertime, everything runs to the boards. There's a gap underneath the boards. It's always been a challenge for us to figure out how do we flood it and keep the water in the rink. You get days that get a little bit warm, of course, everything wants to exit. Even if the water is a little warmer underneath the ice, she'll want to drain out. Becker has this product right now that we're going to try. It's like a 3-gallon pail, I believe that is, and they say 1.5 of that pail will do the entire rink. So we bought 4 of these pails. I think it was a total cost of $150 for 4 pails. We're going to try that. What it does is it expands inside the joints. You kind of trowel it in. You take a spray and you spray that or mist it down. It freezes. You do that a couple times. Then you can start layering your ice. Once you do that, you don't want to start throwing a whole bunch of water at it because the water's 52 degrees already, and that'll just melt everything that you've done. So I believe there's one slide where Eric has in here where he shows the layers, the chunk. And that's how we want to keep everything in there. So.
So ice rink communications, we're going to be pretty aggressive about communicating to the community. One of those things we'll do consistent posts to Facebook, Instagram, and the website. And through this process, we kind of identified that there's different stages along the process for making ice. It's not just going out and spraying at once and being done. We're going to have a web page that I've created that is dedicated to the ice rink. We'll have status updates on there so that we can say we're in this specific phase. And then one of the things that I know has been a challenge is people need to stay off the ice. If they don't, before it's ready, they will make cracks and divots in there, and then that creates a whole nother process for repairing that. So kind of delicately send that message on the web page.
Can we delicately send also too that if you set your ice tray outside and it won't freeze because it's over 32, there's no way to make the ice rink freeze?
Well, that's a great point.
Okay, we
Because
said it not so delicate.
Yeah.
even over the years, people think that's a chilled rink.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they don't understand, we came from South Dakota. They're making ice now. Why can't we?
Or Edina's making ice now.
Right,
Or it's
exactly.
been below freezing for 3 days. Why
Yeah.
isn't the rink done?
Exactly.
Or one night.
After it's been
Or one night it got below 0.
Yeah.
Why isn't it? Last
Yeah.
night, yes.
Yeah.
So those are challenges, but I think this is, and actually I think Brent came up with the idea of maybe throwing some flags out there that identify, where the condition of the ice is at. And then I think it just progressed into the signage, and this is not something I've ordered yet, and I wanted it for your consideration. This is what we would post out there to tell where the rink is at right now, just so you have a visual. Like I said, somebody drives up to the warming house, they want to go out there, it's pretty easy to see, hey, we're either working on the rink, or it's closed, or
Can you
it's
make the
closed for
blue one
season.
though a different color? I want it to stand out more, because that's the important one really, right? To stay off of it.
Like yellow?
Yeah, make it
Why
brighter.
That's a good idea.
Why wouldn't we make, I think we should make it red, make it really clear.
Well, the red is kind of, you know, it means stop. That's kind of the way
Okay,
we
yeah,
looked at
that's
that.
fine.
Yeah, but generally, like, when we close it for the season, it's really clear. There isn't any ice, it's a
Right, it's
it's a
cement.
pool
Right.
at that
Yeah,
point.
make that
So,
brighter, put a red, make it red.
pink,
Okay.
I like pink.
In the shape of
Red
the
is-
Zamboni.
No.
Jesus.
So, should we come back with some different colors for you, just?
No, we just.
Just
No.
one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the phases that we're looking at, and those correspond with the
Yeah.
signs. There's that layer that I was talking about, that Eric sprayed.
One thing I didn't touch on is that we are gonna actually have that sign with that QR code, so if somebody wanted to go to the website, we're gonna make that it will direct right to that page, and then we can say we're in phase 4, and, you know, we hope it'll be soon. So that page will constantly be updated so that we can keep the messaging clear.
And the lights don't go on except for when somebody's flooding the rink at night.
No, they
Except
are,
for when it's,
they are on a timer,
okay,
so they would come on, but I mean, if we're at the point where we don't want them on it, we'd shut that off.
okay, yeah. 'Cause I think
Eric
that-
is out there every day checking it. If it doesn't pass, he'll shut them
Okay, perfect.
off.
And then finally, final update, this is another
You know,
thing.
I was gonna say, we only have 5 minutes, and I absolutely have to jump online for work at 10:02, because we always end at 10:02. I do have some discussion for this. Is it something that maybe can wait until the
Let's see what we
regular?
can get done.
Okay,
5 minutes.
So this is something that Paul and Eric brought to the parks team. Park equipment at the skating park is 20 years old. You can see some pictures. Paul probably sent me like 20, but the metal trim is peeling away. Support boards are rotting. Laminate chipping and cracking. No replacement parts. So the plan is to remove the equipment within the next 30 days. Convert the space to a leisure rink. Then this summer add basketball goals, and in the future take the basketball goals out of the existing skating rink and add some more pickleball. So it's a kind of a bigger park change, so we just wanted to get some feedback from the council before we took that on.
Has it reached the point of being dangerous?
Yes.
Okay.
okay, so this has been here for quite a while, but it's also fairly heavily used. When we talk about taking this out and replacing with a leisure rink, so the skating rink this weekend, I mean, we're almost in January, it's supposed to be 50 degrees, right? We're getting there. Our rink time that we're open is a couple of months long, maybe 2 really good months of it, where the skate park, that can be used for 6 months at a time, rather than taking something out. Granted, I'm not saying we should keep the dilapidated stuff, but to say we're not going to have a skate rink or skate park here any longer, and we're going to use it as a leisure skating rink. I get that you're talking about adding basketball and things like that. The skate park, unless something has changed dramatically, and my eyes are deceiving me, is a fairly heavily used spot. Now, I know we're having a new one that's going on, or that is up here, but a lot, if we think about this area of town, and kids on their bikes, and the movement of that, they're most likely gonna stop at that one, rather than go all the way up, and that's gonna serve a different community area up there than this one is gonna serve down here. So I'm having some issues, I'm a little remiss to say, let's take out something that can be used this much of the year to be replaced with something that can be used this month, 2 months of the year. And the basketball, we have basketball inside the rink right now, there's hoops there. I don't see them being heavily used inside there.
You can hold off on the basketball and let things settle down. If that's
Okay.
the preference.
So and I know that we don't have budgeted for new skate park equipment right now, but I think, and we are adding additional pickleball striping to the main skating rink area, so we're gonna have that already taken care of. I think we should look about keeping a skate park here. One thing that was absolutely done correctly when this was put in is that it was put on a very easily sightseeing place. It keeps down on vandalism, on the shenanigans of youth. So I don't know that I think the best use of this space is to turn it into a leisure skating rink for 2 months of the year.
Just one point of clarify, like, would you be okay if we just did a leisure rink in the winter months and then address the skating park as a part of the 25 budget?
Yes, I would be fine, because if this is, what I'm hearing is this has become dangerous to the point where it's broken down far enough that it should be removed regardless for safety reasons. If we wanted to leisure rink it for the winter now, if it ever comes, then I think we should definitely readdress getting new skate park equipment in this area
And that's,
after that.
For budget.
yeah, that's our primary ask right now, so I appreciate that feedback, is we want to get that equipment out of there, post it to the website and stuff so people know it's leaving, but if the council wants more time to decide what that future space looks like, happy to accommodate
I
that.
agree with that. Let's not do
Yeah.
anything that inhibits a future skate park. New equipment.
But I think the team would like to at least try during the winter months, since there's nothing there, to put down a leisure rink and see if it works, if that's acceptable.
Sure. Because we did it in the parking lot last year, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine if the equipment has to go anyway.
Yeah. I don't know that I'm in favor of seeing a skate park being replaced there, but for the short term, I support pulling that, because boy, if somebody gets caught on that, that's
Yeah,
gonna
and once
be a
we
huge
start pulling
gash.
it, it's just gonna fall apart.
Yeah.
It is completely rotten
Pull it.
structure underneath it,
Pull it,
so.
yeah, let's find a temporary use for, as Christy says, if winter ever gets here. And then, yeah, let's figure out, I do like the idea of pickleball. I know that we're expanding our pickleball offerings, it seems like quite frequently these days, but from what I hear from our community, we can't have too many pickleball courts.
But this is the main skating rink, right?
Yeah.
Not the
Say
leisure
that
one.
again?
That where the additional pickleball striping is in the main
Correct.
rink, yeah.
We can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
All right, I think we're clear
Yep.
on that,
Thank you.
and within your time
Thank you.
parameters, so, thank you. Okay, let's see, we'll save council requests for the main meeting, if there are any. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Councilmember Hirschman, and a second by
Lori Sayer.
I'll second.
All right.